Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. In a statement, the palace said the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. Balmoral Castle, early September 2022. A 96-year-old monarch still at work, still receiving the formal machinery of government, and still performing the constitutional act that defines the British state. The Privy Councillors and the Queen was going to do a Zoom, which is very straightforward, and a message came through saying that she had cancelled the Zoom. This was really the first time that the Queen had been unable to undertake a constitutional duty. In those final days, Queen Elizabeth II was not in public view, but she was not absent from duty either. Today, we'll unveil what exactly the Queen was doing during her final days. Let's get started. Final summer at Balmoral. Balmoral Castle in Aberdeenshire had always been more than a residence for Queen Elizabeth II. It functioned as a seasonal withdrawal from constitutional gravity. The summer of 2022 was no exception. She arrived in July, as was customary, beginning what would unknowingly become her final extended stay at the estate she had first visited as a child and later inherited as a place of personal freedom, far from the formality of Buckingham Palace. The estate itself spans roughly 50,000 acres of highland terrain, and it was here, among its forests, rivers, and guarded seclusion, that the 96-year-old monarch reduced her public-facing life to its most essential form. By this point, her mobility issues were no longer subtle. From late 2021 into 2022, she had increasingly used a walking stick during public appearances, and by May 2022, Buckingham Palace had acknowledged she was experiencing episodic mobility problems. At Balmoral, however, her days were structured around short, controlled movements within the castle grounds, supported by long-serving staff, including personal protection officers and household aides who had served her for decades. Even brief walks with her corgis became carefully timed intervals. Despite physical constraints, she retained a degree of routine. She engaged in light administrative reading and light paperwork. However, unlike earlier decades when red boxes of state papers dominated her schedule, these final weeks were more selective, curated down to essential correspondence. Yet, even in this reduced form, the structure of monarchy remained intact around her, with visitors arriving under strict coordination, preserving the privacy of a sovereign who had ruled for 70 years. Balmoral itself amplified this sense of controlled seclusion. Unlike London residences designed for ceremony and state function, the Scottish estate operated as a private world where the monarchy could momentarily shed visibility. This was the place where she had once ridden horses across the grounds, hosted informal family gatherings, and spent private holidays with Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, whose death in April 2021 at age 99 had fundamentally altered the emotional architecture of her later life. Their marriage had lasted 73 years, and after his passing, observers noted a visible reduction in her public engagements and a shift toward more constrained appearances. In July and August 2022, Philip's absence was quietly embedded into the atmosphere of Balmoral. Family visits became more significant. Members of the extended royal household rotated through the estate, including close relatives who came to spend time with her during the summer recess. These were low-profile visits scheduled around her energy levels and medical advisories. Even within the structure of monarchy, the center of gravity had shifted inward, away from institutions and toward immediate family proximity. What defined this final Balmoral summer was not a single event, but the reduction of scale itself. A sovereign who had once met world leaders weekly was now conducting life in carefully measured segments of privacy, where even movement across a room was considered in advance. By early September 2022, this carefully maintained stillness at Balmoral would begin to tighten into something more urgent as private routines started yielding to medical attention. But in those final summer weeks, the Queen remained at the center of a quiet, controlled environment that contrasted sharply with the global institution she represented. And it was precisely this contrast between public magnitude and private reduction that defined the closing chapter of her life. The loss that changed everything. April 9, 2021, at Windsor Castle, marked a rupture in the life of the monarch. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, died at the age of 99, ending a marriage that had begun in 1947 at Westminster Abbey and lasted 73 years. The Queen not only lost her husband, but the person who had functioned as her closest confidant, logistical support system, and constant companion across royal duty and private life. Philip's role in her life was often understated in public framing, but structurally significant. He had accompanied her on thousands of engagements over decades, including Commonwealth tours spanning more than 70 countries. His absence removed a stabilizing presence that had shaped the operational rhythm of her daily schedule. After his retirement from public duties in 2017, he remained largely at Windsor Castle, and the two had effectively transitioned into a quieter domestic partnership within the broader machinery of the monarchy. That domestic balance ended abruptly in April 2021. The immediate aftermath was marked by enforced isolation due to COVID-19 restrictions. The Queen sat alone during Philip's funeral on April 17, 2021, at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. The image of a solitary monarch, masked and distanced in a chapel built for royal continuity, became one of the most widely circulated visual records of her later years. Following Philip's death, there was a measurable reduction in her public engagements. While age and health were already limiting factors, the calendar began to thin and to change it more sharply. Events that she had previously attended regularly were delegated or missed entirely. The Royal Maundy service, state openings, and several Commonwealth-related appearances increasingly shifted to Prince Charles and other senior royals acting on her behalf. Although Buckingham Palace rarely framed these changes in emotional terms, royal observers consistently linked the decline in visibility to the loss of her husband.